A house in multiple occupation, commonly known as an HMO, is a specific type of rental property. It is defined as a property rented out by at least 3 people who are not from one household, like a family, but share facilities like the kitchen and bathroom. Think of it as a shared house. This setup is quite distinct from a standard buy-to-let, where you might rent an entire flat or house to a single family unit. Understanding this fundamental difference is the very first step for any aspiring property investor looking into this potentially lucrative market segment. The shared nature of the living space is what defines it, and also dictates many of the subsequent management and regulatory considerations involved. HMOs have become increasingly attractive to property investors for several compelling reasons. The primary driver behind their popularity is often the potential for significantly higher rental yields compared to traditional single-let properties. By renting out individual rooms, landlords can often generate a greater total monthly income from one property than they would by letting it to a single family. This increased cash flow can be particularly appealing in areas with high tenant demand for rooms. This financial upside is a powerful motivator, drawing many towards considering an HMO strategy for their property portfolio, aiming to maximize their returns on investment quickly. Another significant advantage of investing in HMOs is the diversification of rental income and the consequently reduced risk of complete void periods. If you have one tenant in a single let property and they decide to leave, your entire rental income stream from that property ceases until you find a replacement. With an HMO, however, if one tenant vacates their room, you still have rental income coming in from the other tenants occupying the remaining rooms in the property. This spreads the financial risk, making your investment potentially more resilient to tenant turnover and ensuring a more consistent cash flow throughout the year, which is a comforting factor for many landlords. Furthermore, there is a growing and sustained demand for affordable shared housing in many parts of the UK, particularly in urban areas, university towns, and cities with significant young professional populations. Factors such as rising house prices, the increasing cost of living, and a more transient workforce contribute to this demand. Many individuals, especially students and young professionals, prefer or require the flexibility and lower cost of renting a room rather than an entire flat. This underlying market demand provides a solid foundation for investors considering the HMO route, suggesting a steady pool of potential tenants for well-managed properties that meet their needs. Despite the attractions, investing in HMOs comes with its own set of considerable challenges. One of the initial hurdles is the potentially high setup costs. Converting a standard property into a compliant and desirable HMO often requires significant capital investment. This can include structural changes to create additional bedrooms, upgrading shared facilities like kitchens and bathrooms, installing robust fire safety systems, and fully furnishing multiple rooms to a good standard. On top of these conversion costs, there are also initial licensing fees to consider, which can add substantially to the upfront financial commitment required before any rental income is even received by the landlord. Finding and managing multiple tenants presents another layer of complexity unique to HMOs. Unlike a single let property where you deal with one tenancy agreement and one set of tenants, an HMO involves managing individual agreements for each room. This inherently means a higher tenant turnover rate as individuals move for work, study, or personal reasons. Consequently, landlords or their managing agents must dedicate more time and effort to advertising rooms, vetting potential tenants, handling check-ins and check-outs, and managing the dynamics between different occupants sharing the same living space. This increased management burden should not be underestimated when planning your investment. Maintenance in an HMO property also tends to be more intensive and costly. With a greater number of occupants using the shared facilities, there's naturally more wear and tear on the property. Communal areas such as kitchens, bathrooms and hallways will likely require more frequent cleaning, redecoration and repairs compared to a property occupied by a single family. Landlords must budget for this increased maintenance and respond promptly to issues to keep tenants happy and the property in good condition. Proactive maintenance can prevent smaller issues from escalating into larger, more expensive problems down the line, ensuring the property remains attractive to tenants. Beyond these operational challenges, there are also significant risks involved. Non-compliance with the stringent HMO regulations can lead to severe penalties, including substantial fines or even criminal prosecution. Tenant disputes can also arise more frequently in shared living environments, requiring careful and sometimes delicate management to resolve conflicts. Property damage, whether accidental or malicious, is another risk that is potentially heightened with multiple occupants. Furthermore, while HMOs can offer higher yields, poorly managed properties or those in low-demand areas can suffer from extended void periods for individual rooms, significantly impacting the overall profitability of the venture for the investor. Navigating the legal requirements is absolutely crucial for any HMO landlord in the UK. A key aspect of this is HMO licensing. Mandatory licensing applies nationwide to HMOs that are occupied by 5 or more people forming 2 or more separate households. However, it's vital to understand that many local councils operate additional licensing schemes, which can extend licensing requirements to smaller HMOs, perhaps those with only 3 or 4 occupants. Therefore, you must check the specific rules with your local authority for the area where your property is located to ensure you are fully compliant from the outset, as operating without a necessary license is a serious offence. Safety standards in HMOs are particularly rigorous and non-negotiable, designed to protect the well-being of multiple occupants living under one roof. Landlords have a legal duty to ensure the property is safe. This includes comprehensive fire safety measures such as mains-wired smoke alarms in all bedrooms and communal areas, heat detectors in kitchens, fire doors where required, and clear, unobstructed fire escape routes. Annual gas safety checks by a gas-safe registered engineer are mandatory, as are electrical safety inspections, EICRs, at least every 5 years by a qualified electrician. Keeping meticulous records of these checks is also a fundamental part of compliance. Planning permission is another critical area of red tape that HMO investors must carefully consider before purchasing or converting a property. In many areas of the UK, changing the use of a standard dwelling house, use Class C3, to a small HMO shared by 3 to 6 unrelated individuals, use Class C4, may fall under permitted development rights. However, if the property is intended to house 7 or more people, it will be classed as a sui generis HMO and will always require full planning permission. Furthermore, many local authorities have implemented Article 4 directions, which remove permitted development rights for C4 HMOs, meaning full planning permission is needed even for smaller HMOs in those designated areas. Beyond licensing, safety and planning, there are numerous other legal obligations. Landlords must provide tenants with legally compliant tenancy agreements, protect their deposits in a government-approved scheme, and conduct right-to-rent checks to ensure tenants have the legal right to reside in the UK. An Energy Performance Certificate, EPC, with a minimum rating of E is required before a property can be let. Landlords must also adhere to regulations concerning overcrowding, ensuring adequate room sizes, and maintaining the property to a habitable standard. Staying updated with all these regulations is an ongoing responsibility for any HMO investor. The financial viability of an HMO hinges on its potential to generate higher profits compared to other types of rental properties, but this requires careful calculation and management. While gross rental yields can appear very attractive on paper, it is the net yield, after all expenses are deducted, that truly matters. Investors must meticulously account for all potential outgoings to get a realistic picture of profitability. These include mortgage payments, specialist HMO insurance, council tax, which is often the landlord's responsibility in an HMO, and utility bills, if they are included in the rent. Understanding these figures accurately from the start is paramount for financial success. Common expenses in an HMO extend beyond the obvious mortgage and utility costs. Landlords must budget for regular maintenance and repairs, which, as discussed, can be higher in HMOs. Void periods, when rooms are empty between tenancies, will inevitably occur and reduce income, so a contingency for this should be factored in. If you plan to use a letting agent specializing in HMO management, their fees will also impact your net profit. Other costs can include licensing fees, safety certification renewals, and potential redecoration costs between tenancies to keep the property appealing. A detailed spreadsheet tracking all income and expenditure is an invaluable tool. There are several key tips for maximizing returns from your HMO investment. Thorough tenant selection is paramount. Finding reliable tenants who pay rent on time and respect the property and their housemates can significantly reduce management headaches and costs. Investing in high-quality, durable furnishings and fittings might seem more expensive initially, but it can save money in the long run by reducing the need for frequent replacements. Efficient management, whether self-managed or through a reputable agent, is crucial for keeping voids low, addressing issues promptly, and maintaining good tenant relations, all of which contribute directly to a healthier bottom line. Ultimately, success in the HMO market relies heavily on comprehensive due diligence and ongoing education. Thoroughly research the local area to understand tenant demand, typical room rents, and the level of competition from other HMOs. Speak to local letting agents and other investors. Understand the specific requirements of your target tenant demographic. Students will have different needs to young professionals, for example. While HMOs can offer excellent returns, they are not a passive investment. They require diligence, careful planning, and proactive management. However, for investors prepared to navigate the complexities, the rewards can indeed be substantial and fulfilling.